The fish wade through black jade.
It felt like a dive into a dark water. Maybe an evening dive when the light's going away and it's just starting to get really dark and you're not sure whether you're doing a night dive now or a day dive.
Of the crow blue mussel shells, one keeps adjusting the ash heaps, opening and shutting itself like an injured fan. The barnacles which encrust the side of the wave cannot hide there, where the submerged shafts of the sun, split like spun glass, move themselves with spotlight swiftness into the crevices, in and out, illuminating the turquoise sea of bodies.
Sun split like spun glass. That, to me, that line kind of created the imagery for me of what it's like to be underwater.
The water drives a wedge of iron through the iron edge of the cliff, whereupon the stars, pink, rice grains, ink bespattered jellyfish, crabs like green lilies, and submarine toadstools slide each on the other.
Well, she's seeing the cornucopia of life. Just incredible how all of the elements interact with one another, all of the different life forms relate to one another.
All external marks of abuse are present on this defiant edifice. All the physical features of accident, lack of cornice, dynamite grooves, burns, and hatchet strokes, these things stand out on it. The chasm side is dead.
And what I see is the chasm, or as I see is that cliff, that edge that's been cut by water. And it's a rock that's been carved by the elements.
It's very powerful what she's trying to convey, and so the forces are both creation, destruction, light, darkness, terrestrial, marine.
Repeated evidence has proved that it can live on what cannot revive its youth. The sea grows old in it.
Over her career, the poet Marianne Moore wrote dozens of poems about animals and the complex environments in which they evolve. A biology major in college, a librarian, a typing teacher, and a magazine editor, Moore emerged in the early 20th century as one of those modernist innovators who used abstraction to awaken perceptions of color, form, and the dynamic interplay of elements. Moore liked fact, and she disliked the poetry that indulged human ego, romantic feeling, or sentiment. Nature was the poet's guide, Moore stressed, and the artist's role was to evolve utterly new and wondrous creations, but out of the real materials of the world. Precision and clarity, not overflow of emotion, were the modern poet's proper tools.
Marianne Moore was reacting to a long moment in poetry where you could just use whatever came at you from the natural world to turn it to service for your own emotions. In this case, there's an attempt to encounter it and have it guide you to emotions you don't necessarily know you have.
To explore Moore's poem, The Fish, I invited some keen observers of the natural world to read the poem with me. 6 ocean scientists from Conservation International, Vice President and Nobel Prize-winning environmentalist Al Gore, and the poet Jory Graham.
I think it's important to remember that this poem is in a book called Observations, and the idea of observing is a very different idea than looking or thinking. So the very first word in the first line she tells you is wade, which is a very slow action. And she's saying, if you're going to wade into this observation, you're going to take it step by step.
And you're going to encounter resistance.
I love to scuba dive. I've experienced fish, and their movements are defined by the things they're going around and through. And it's almost a wading.
There's a slow motion.
You know, if you go really deep into the ocean, there are fish that basically look like they're walking on the pectoral fins. They're not elegant fish. And when they're on the bottom, as they walk through, I get that sense of exactly what she's describing here.
They wade through black jade. Look at what you have to do as a reader to undergo that line. You know that she's describing a certain color of water. It's water, it's not jade. Jade is one of the hardest stones that exist. It's also just water. And a reader coming from another planet would say to us, they're wading through black jade?
Of the crow blue mussel shells, one keeps adjusting the ash heaps, opening and shutting itself like an injured fan.
The inkiness of water came through to me.
Crow blue, that's dark, that's rich, that's deep. And I mean, I used to take my glasses off to look at images just to be able to see the colors and the patterns as opposed to the detail.
The science-inspired observation Moore practices attends closely to characteristics like color, shape, and texture, and it leads naturally to modernist abstraction. Considered simply as color, jade, crows, and mussel shells are all the same, and the perception of their resemblance jars and stimulates the senses.
Then you're going to be stuck with the troubling act of one thing being so like another that you simultaneously do many different things, to know that your rational intellect says it's not jade, it's not crow blue, but your imagination says, yes, it is, I can see that. Your senses are what's awakened. How hard is one thing? How soft is another thing? So she's trying to get you to both observe, but also to undergo the practice of observing so that you can be transformed.
Perception is also disturbed by the way the poem is cut into stanzas, the way its syntax suffers sudden interruptions, as, at the end of the first stanza, a simile is sliced in two halves, as if literally injured. The observer wading into this poem discovers that just as water, light, stone, and organic bodies all interact, shaping and eroding one another, so too do Moore's sentences, stanzas, lines, and rhymes interact to form a dynamic modernist collage. In the erosive onrush of sentences, we may even miss the chiseled rhymes that define the poem's right-hand edge, but the small elements prove mighty. Each syllable in the poem literally counts.
The Fish is a poem in syllabics, which means only the syllables in each line are counted. And each stanza has one syllable in the first line, then 3, 9, 6, and 8. Like a machine cutting the sentences at very arbitrary feeling places.
I read it on my phone. So I'm sitting there reading it stanza by stanza on my phone. And then when I got into work, I printed it out and look at how the words, I didn't look at the form of the poem until this morning and just sort of smiled to myself and thought, wow, that's pretty clever.
Each stanza resembles all of the others, and each has a definitive form that is perhaps like a fish, perhaps like a wave.
Throughout the poem, you see these up and down and up and down. She's mimicking the ocean.
It's something that is actually moving the fish. It's not only the fish swimming. It's some other forces, like waves or currents.
These are also waves of sound. If you have a syllabic thing, you could probably say that that wave would move with a frequency through water, not unlike the way the fish wade through it.